Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Aimee Baron. I am the founder and executive director of I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, and we are bringing you another live tonight with Reva Peyser, who is a wonderful dietitian, and she's going to be talking to us all about disordered eating, body image, fertility. This is a really hot topic, especially for people who are on fertility journeys and trying to figure out, like, what does our body look like? How can we deal with all the different things the society is telling us, that our doctors are telling us, that friends are telling us, everything, our family. So I'm really excited to bring Reva on here. For us, please drop it in the chat and in the comments, in the chat, whatever. And we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. But and I think here she is.
Hi.
Here she is, Reva. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so we are going to be talking about disordered eating, body image, and fertility. But before we get really into the heart of it, please introduce yourself. Tell people who you are. You're also, besides your title and your bio and all the things, we're so excited because you are one of our new board members here at I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. So we're also thrilled to have you from that perspective. But introduce yourself. Tell people who you are.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being here, especially for such an important topic, and I think a really sensitive and meaningful one for a lot of people. So I hope people walk out of this feeling just good and that they get some good insight, or they just don't feel less alone. But I'm Reva Schlanger Peyser. I'm a registered dietitian. I mainly focus on eating disorders. I've worked in various treatment facilities. Currently, I'm in the private practice realm. And I've had the pleasure of actually working with clients on either getting pregnant, going through miscarriages, kind of all the emotions and the discomfort, both, I guess, physically and emotionally, that have come with it, where there's been, I think, successes, and then there's also been non-successes, so to speak. And I think it's just working through that. And, for myself, I've gone through my own fertility journey, which is why I'm so honored to be part of the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby board. So I think that, that also lends itself to a new light where I'm able to kind of use my experience, as well as understand that every single person, no matter what you're dealing with, it could be even you're going through IVF or whatever it might be, every person has a different experience, and it's really important to give space to that person. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here and hopefully lend some of my expertise.
Absolutely. Already, look, even in the way that you're speaking now, just in that, I get it. And I've been there, and in my own personal life and also in my professional life, just even that, I think is so comforting for people in this community, because people just feel so alone in so many ways. Um, so let's jump right into this. So I think maybe let's start with some of your background and training as a dietitian, and specifically disordered eating. And talk about what you're seeing, what you see in your clients in terms of the kinds of things where people are trying to get pregnant. Let's deal with infertility to start out, right? People are trying to get pregnant, and there's all this stuff out there about, oh, well, you should eat this and you shouldn't eat that. And, make sure you take this kind of supplement and that kind of supplement, stay away from this. Oh, and if you eat pineapple, or if you eat this, just give us sort of a window. Yes, to all of you who can't actually see what Reva's doing right now, because I know some of you are going to listen to this later on audio. Reva's making this face and covering her face, oh my God, I can't believe. Yes. So let's talk about all the good, all the bad, all the things that you see, and try to maybe dispel some of these myths. Let's
Oh
start
yeah,
there.
that's my favorite thing, is myth busting. So that's perfect. And yeah, it was a face of horror also because even though I am a dietitian, I go by research-based evidence. I've done the Google rabbit hole or Reddit or whatever you want to do, and it is definitely a rabbit hole. I mean, it's so frustrating because I think a lot of times, and this is even where I see a lot of disordered eating, kind of leading to eating disorder, this lack of control. And we want to take it back. And a lot of times people then tend to gravitate towards their food or their body or something like that. So I think, with dealing with infertility, it's a really tough subject for anyone because it's very personal. I know for me, when I went through, miscarriages and whatnot, like I felt like the one thing I'm supposed to do, I failed. My body failed me. And it was really heartbreaking and really difficult. And so then you go to the web, and what I've seen is for a lot of people, they either blame themselves, which I just want to say right now, it is not your fault. To whoever needs to hear it, it is never your fault. Our bodies are what our bodies are, and they're beautiful. Okay? You don't have to love it right now. You don't have to feel like it's beautiful. But at the end of the day, it's allowing you to live, to be here, and give you other really positive qualities that you're able to do. So I just want to put that out there. And I also understand the hurt and frustration. It makes a lot of sense. And what I see is kind of two sides of the spectrum where people either go to a place of, I don't want to call it necessarily neglect, but it's this emotional, just despondent, forget it all, might as well use food as comfort, which again, hey, emotional eating has a place for everyone, but I think it's the degree. And a lot of times, sometimes I see that lean towards maybe more of a binge eating, which for those who don't know, that's eating a large amount of food in a certain controlled period of time. And it's a very out of control, uncomfortable feeling. So there's kind of that, and it's actually food almost as a form of self-harm. And then kind of the other way I see is this almost over-controlled. Well, I'm going to make my body the best thing possible. I'm going to read all the books. I'm going to eat the cleanest, whatever clean is, because I could go into that, but that's a whole other Insta live. And then they start restricting, and that becomes almost their life, their personality. And I think part of the way it is that food or lack of food becomes the shield from dealing with what's really going on. And that's really hard because and that's what I do partially with a lot of help with therapists, is taking away that shield of food and really looking at what's going on. How do we feel the pain, kind of process it, and then move through it, and kind of using some self-care and positive coping skills, which we could get into a little bit later. But I wanted to kind of go over some of the food myths, where you mentioned pineapple. I feel like that's such a common one, where you're like, oh, you're gonna eat pineapple, right? After you go through a transfer. And I get it, they're saying it because it's all over the internet, and it's the compound bromelain, which is an enzyme. Again, there's no research to back that. And it's also really found more concentrated in the core, which who eats the core of a pineapple? I don't know. I just buy it cut up because I'm lazy. But, listen, if you love pineapple, go ahead, knock yourself out, eat some pineapple. It's rich in vitamin C. It's yummy. It's good for you still. But don't think that if you don't have that pineapple, that's why the transfer didn't work. Or, you're having the pineapple, so everything's going to be okay. Bodies are really miraculous, and they're really cool. And also, they're sometimes disappointing. And no, there's no miracle pill, there's no miracle food. It's the same thing as the classic, people say McDonald's French fries.
Totally. I was just going to say that actually. I hear all the time, I see all these different accounts, all over social media. And after their transfers, everybody's like, look, I need to go get my McDonald's, or I'm getting my McDonald's. I'm like, why number one McDonald's? Why not Burger King or Wendy's or whatever? I'm like, what's the deal with the French fries?
I know, it's so true. I think it's more so in my mind, sometimes infertility can feel super isolating. So they you take these foods, and it almost becomes a sense of community. When did you get your McDonald's French fries? Which that's cool and that's great. But I mean, I keep kosher. I'm not going to McDonald's. So it's very crazy if you think about it. And listen, if you're craving French fries and pizza, go ahead and eat it. Like, eat what your body's telling you it wants and what it enjoys. I think overall, yes, you need to have a balanced diet, whatever that means. However, again, and I always say this, is it's all about the client. It's very individualized. So what works for me is not going to work for you. And that's not going to work for someone else. Like, we all go through different stages of life. And so our bodies require different foods in different proportions as we age, which I think then kind of goes into the point of bodies change. So, you maybe even like the first round of shots or whatever, you were able to bounce back quickly. But as you get older through it, it's not always so easy. And that can be extremely frustrating. And also, that's normal. You're not alone in that. And there's different ways to work on it if you want to. But I think it's partially about, how do you be okay in this new body? And how do you feel beautiful in it? Or if you're not ready to feel beautiful, how do you just accept it and maybe have some?
Yeah, can you exactly, can you talk more about that? Because especially today, actually, we were, we were dealing with a specific messages that were coming in, and I've seen them over and over the course of the last, number of years. People are constantly feeling like their bodies are failing them. Their bodies are not themselves. Like, they take these medications and the medications make them bloated, and then they feel like they're pregnant, and people think that they're pregnant, but they're not pregnant, and they want to get back down to their regular size, and they're squeezing themselves into like smaller and smaller, their clothes, which don't fit, and they're deeply uncomfortable. And then there's also this other sense of like, people who have to do treatment, it means that their body is failing them because it didn't work the way it was supposed to. Or what if they do take the medication, but then the medication doesn't work and they don't produce the number of eggs that they wanted? Or, a million other things. Like, basically, that people really do feel that their bodies are failing them and they're not performing in the way that they hoped. And so, how do you advise people who are feeling this real disconnect?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing I advise is, it sucks. Like, feel that suck. And that is totally okay. I think that's number one. It's like, one of my biggest pet peeves is when someone says, well, at least this, that, like, it's almost like the but. And I'm like, it's so invalidating. Like, that's the first place I think to start. Is it is really heartbreaking to go through this. Just hands down, that's it. Um, you know, and you still have a life, and I think that that's really important, that the life doesn't just stop. Your life, I mean. And it, as difficult as that is to hear, I think sometimes it's about, how do we accept, grieve, and then move forward? And some of that is kind of just trying to exist in a certain way. But I think self-care comes in a lot here, because medications are medications, doctors are doctors, and they're going to do their best, and that's wonderful. But your, like, bodies are smarter, or they're more resilient, so to speak, which that can sometimes be to our detriment, unfortunately. Like, there's people who have autoimmune disease, there's PCOS, like, there's all these other medical conditions, Hashimoto's, like, that people forget about. So it's not just, well, you take these medications and it all works. If it did, like, it would just be an easy thing, and we probably wouldn't have, I was supposed to have a baby, So it's difficult because we can't control, and that's unfortunate. And let's, like, try to shift on what you can control. And I think, like, part of that is, because I know the bloat is real. Especially, like, once you go through the embryo transfer, besides for the fact that, like, I mean, the egg retrieval,
Yep.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, I'm not saying, I always get them mixed up, and people get, but you're on all these medications, you feel super uncomfortable, You go through the actual retrieval. You think it's done, and for me at least, it got a whole lot worse because then you have these empty sacs and fluid builds up in there, you know, the whole shebang. So then you feel even worse, and there's the thought of like, well, I have to perform at work. People are going to see me. I feel so bloated. My clothes don't fit. And those are all real feelings. If that is the case, buy new clothing. And I know that sounds so cliche and like, I don't want new clothing. I know you don't want new clothing. I don't want new clothes either. However, you don't have to go on this like $1,000 shopping spree. Go to H&M, go to Target, go wherever that's pretty affordable. It's temporary. Get some clothes that are comfortable. Because if you're uncomfortable, you're going to constantly think about your body and think about what you think other people are thinking about. Whether they are thinking that or not, we can't control people and what they do. We can only educate. However, you know, people are going to do their own thing. The least you can do is at least feel comfortable. Maybe you're more hidden. Maybe, you know, that's what you like. Maybe you want to buy Spanx, whatever floats your boat. I think do that. Or, you know, if you're buying something that's a little bit looser, totally fine. Maybe like go splurge on some funky shoes or accessorize. I always tell clients, like, you don't like your body, accessorize, enhance the parts that you do like. You like your hair, get a headband. Or you don't like your hair, put a headband on, which is what I'm doing. But, you know, do some jewelry, some shoes, whatever you need to do to kind of get through the day and take it day by day. Don't look long term. It's day by day. I also say like set like almost like a timer, 10 minutes. That's the time it's going to take you to get ready. You're not allowed to look in the mirror longer than that because the more you look in the mirror, the more you start to ruminate. And I think that's a societal pressure that we've learned as we've grown up, which is a whole other frustration of mine, but I think it is really real and you have to just get away from that. I also would say put sticky notes on your mirror if you need to. Like, you got this. You're beautiful. Do your best. Whatever you need. Like, I love you. It's almost like a fake it till you make it. And just these little reminders of self-love and that this is not your fault. You didn't choose this. And go out and be you. Like, you know, like have some like of that love for yourself that is in there.
I love like just that like idea about just really trying to like confine the time that you're like having that negative self-talk, like just like and I think it's unrealistic. Like I love the way you're saying it. Like it's not, it's totally unrealistic to think that you're not going to do it. Like of course you're going to do it because you wanted your body to be different, you wanted your body to look different, whatever it is. So of course you're going to have some of those feelings. So give into it, okay, fine, but limit it and keep it sort of in a box so that you know, okay, you have your moments and you can cry and you can this, but then you need to move on with your day and focus on other things. I think that's such a like smart way to think about it. And I'm thinking also just about myself and like I know after my miscarriages, like I was always like looking down at my body and thinking like my body failed. Like I'm just carrying around all this extra weight and there's no baby and there's nothing there. And like, what does this even mean? And like, why is my body failing? And I like would get myself into this like a really terrible cycle of thinking. And if I only had like this discrete amount of time and then I could sort of put it away, I think it would have been much more helpful. But I was very into shoes at that point because that was like the only thing that still fit. I was like, okay, I need like my clothes, I can look however I'm gonna look, but like at least I have cool shoes. So that was
Yeah.
like the thing.
You know what? It was like a thing where my husband even knew that, where like he still says, like, if I'm upset or a bad day, new pair of shoes. I mean, he never actually like follows through, but I love it that that's the message that we've given. Like, okay, get something that makes you feel good. You know, maybe
Totally.
some person it's a massage for another person, whatever it might be, whatever floats your boat, capitalize on it.
Totally. Totally. What about like other types of myths that like people have in terms of like this kind of space? Like what about this idea that like, you know, if you just like were to do yoga, if you just were to exercise more, if you just were to take these supplements, like what about some of all that stuff? As a dietitian, like how do you handle that? What do you advise people?
Yeah. I mean, shoulda, coulda, woulda, like we're always gonna try to think of, well, we could have done this or we could have done that. I think of it as, like, first of all, supplements, half the time they're unregulated, which I think people don't understand. And a lot of times influencers push supplements because they're paid partners or whatever it might be. And you don't know what you're putting in your body. I'm a very big advocate of like, go by like your doctor. And, if you're unsure, see a dietitian. I'm not going to tell someone, yeah, take XYZ supplements. I'm like, I don't know your blood work. I'm very big into, I need to see what's going on and see your labs and what's happening before I can actually make a recommendation. I also think, you don't take the vitamin C supplement or the iron supplement. Like, as long as you're taking your prenatal, which I think is pretty routine care and standard, and whatever other medications your doctors recommend, you're doing okay. You're doing everything you're supposed to do. I think it's, I had that thought one time with acupuncture because it's very big into acupuncture. I hate acupuncture. I did it one time when I was younger and they like pinched a vein or a nerve, and it was totally out of it, And I remember the first time I had my transfer, I was like, oh my God, I didn't do acupuncture. I should do acupuncture, and thankfully it was successful, but then I had another time around that it was unsuccessful. So, what works for one round doesn't work for the other. And part of that is also to remember whether or not you tested an embryo, let's just say. They only biopsy a very small amount. You don't know what the whole cell is, the whole embryo. So it could be that there is some kind of genetic abnormality. Again, most of the time when transfers fall, like, it's not your fault unless wait, I'm going to correct myself here. It's never your fault. However, unless the doctor says there was a specific issue that happened, you are not to blame. Like, I remember my doctor one time saying to me, did you go on like a bender afterwards? Like, did you rage? Did you go bungee jumping? I'm like, no. And she's like, so then you're fine. And
Oh
I
gosh,
think, like,
that's so great.
if you're not bungee jumping, you're okay.
That's so great. That's so great.
Yeah.
So what? So okay, there are all these things like, okay, you're saying like this is a bunch of nonsense. 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 Like, is there anything that is not a bunch of nonsense? Like, what do you recommend? Like, for people who are struggling to have a baby and whatever it is, like I guess, infertility and loss, sometimes it can be together, sometimes it's in the sense that you want, ideally, we do want to get our bodies to be the most healthy that they can. I think, like, I'll just give a very quick example. Like, I have a dear friend who is struggling to get pregnant, and one of the reasons that her doctor said that she can't get pregnant, that they're not recommending treatment right now, is because her thyroid is out of whack. And once they get her thyroid under control, then they're going to be allowing treatments to move forward. So can you give us sort of general examples of the kinds of things that you do recommend, and things that you do want to be in control of before moving forward?
1000%. I mean, I think for anyone who's maybe struggled with getting pregnant or maybe miscarriage, like, the MTHFR gene, I think, if you could get that tested, again, that's regarding like the methylation of folate, which is really crucial, I think, for getting pregnant and fetal development. And if, you have an issue with that gene, it's a specific gene, usually then doctors will give you more folate to kind of help protect that. So I think, like, that's helpful to ask for. Thyroid is super important. I had no idea that I had like a sluggish thyroid. So, I was prescribed that. So I think, again, that's helpful. And for certain people, it's a slower thyroid, hypothyroidism. Other times for people, it's like Hashimoto's, which you have an overactive thyroid. Again, neither of them are are great, and it's about, a lot of times it's medication. And then there are certain foods in the diet that can help support it. For instance, like Brazil nuts are kind of associated with healthy thyroid. But again, there's also selenium toxicity within Brazil nuts. So you have to kind of know the specific amount, and, having like 3 a day is totally cool. There's, you want to make sure that your blood's like all your micronutrients. So like your B12, so people who are vegetarian, perhaps, it's just good to be aware of certain vitamins that are really important, I think, for fetal development and for implantation. To understand, can you get it from your diet? What sources those are? And if you can't, how do we supplement? And what's the best supplement for you to tolerate? For instance, like iron. A lot of times people struggle with tolerating iron. So it's about finding a pill that works, or when are you having it? Don't have it with your prenatal because that might make you too nauseous, things like that. And, we see a lot of times like PCOS. So that might be an altered diet for a person due to insulin resistance. And you don't want your body to be in an inflammatory state. So I think it's about trying to kind of combat that with, and a lot of times we see it with a very well-balanced diet, kind of leading towards that more Mediterranean look. And again, that's different for every person and every person's lifestyle, but it's about figuring out how to have a balance. Or, what I like to say is, what can we add, not restrict? You're doing what you're, let's add in some more colors, some more fiber, some more like fish. Omega-3 fatty acids are great for our body, but people don't like fish. So can you take an omega-3 supplement? Or, are there certain other ways we can kind of fudge it through the diet?
Can you also talk about this idea, health at every size? Like, because there are, there are a lot of doctors out there who talk about the fact that, oh, you're too overweight to get pregnant. The fertility treatments are not going to work. I'm not even going to touch it. Like, what does that even mean? How do people deal with that? How do you approach, like, if you're someone who's overweight, like, putting aside, okay, like maybe you have a medical reason, maybe you don't have a medical reason for being overweight, whatever it is, but like this notion is there such a thing as being too overweight to get pregnant?
Right. And to me, it's really heartbreaking when doctors do that and they just put a kibosh on something based on a person's size, when, there's so much more to a person than just their weight. Again, there is research that, if you're maybe having habits where, like, let's just say kind of going to the binge eating. So let's just say you're restricting all day and then you're binging at night. And that's why maybe you're in a larger body. So then what I would say is it's really important, and I think this is for anyone, like eating disorder, that's an eating disorder, disordered eating, you need to get that controlled before you can even think about taking care of your body in a different capacity, because you're going to have cravings, you're going to feel nauseous, and that's going to be even harder with an eating disorder. So that's kind of where I would say, like, that's what needs to be managed. I mean, people get pregnant in all bodies. And I say this to clients all the time: go down the street, like just take a walk. Do you see everyone that looks like a supermodel or like a petite, really tiny person? Because I don't. So I don't know where these like glasses are that everyone's seeing, but
Yep.
All different bodies are great. It's the same thing I like to say to clients. We're kind of going to the shoes. I'm very into shoes, but a foot analogy. I have a size, 7.5? What if someone had a size 10 or someone a 5? Would you look at them and judge them based on their shoe size? No, because that's just genetic, and that's what happens to people's feet. And sometimes, you go through life changes, they swell in the heat or whatever it might be. You don't judge a person based on their shoe size. So why do we do it based on their clothing size or what they weigh? That, to me, I have a huge problem with that. And it just doesn't really make sense. And again, if a person has other medical conditions or they have an underlying eating disorder, like, I do think that needs to be taken care of. Number one, sometimes that has to do with the weight, but a lot of times it doesn't. You know, I've had clients who have, you know, had to, for instance, go on Ozempic for diabetes. Now, everyone thinks, oh my God, okay, you lose so much weight. My client didn't necessarily lose so much weight, but that's not what it was intended for. And I was very careful with the dosage. And, you know, I think, again, the dose makes the poison, but, you know, that's where her body wanted to be at. And it's tough because there's a lot of these picture perfect, I did X, Y, and Z, and now I'm so thin and everything's great. But also, you know, being so thin, why is that the end all be all? And a lot of times I actually see people who are maybe fall more in line of like with restrictive eating disorders where they're underweight. That's actually a big issue. And a lot of times there's a lot of malnutrition there, which is even harder to get pregnant. You know, so I just hope that doctors screen as much for that as they do for those who are in larger bodies, because again, it doesn't matter the shape or size, like health is really at all sizes. And, you know, I hope that we are leading into a place that practices like that.
1,000%, 1,000%. And that is what we hear so much from our community, that people of all different sizes are, you know, are struggling, and people of all different sizes are getting pregnant. So it's clear that it's absolutely nothing to do with it. And that's one thing that also we're trying very much to teach, and what we're doing this week with this series on body image. Okay, so as we're sort of closing up here, what would you say? How would you advise someone who comes to you who is just like really unhappy with their body? Really, they feel like their body is failing them over and over and over again. They're trying their best. They're doing all of the things. They like have gotten pregnant, but the pregnancies haven't stuck. Um, you know, their doctors keep saying, try this, try this, try this. Like, how do you, when you sit down with people one-on-one, like, how do you bring people through that trajectory of like they're coming in and they're feeling so bereft and are not sure what to do and think that their eating is maybe the thing that they have to take control over? That might be like the last thing. And yet you want to get them to a place of where they feel whole and they feel good and they feel ready to try again.
Yeah. I mean, I think number one is meeting the client where they're at. So if they're very gung-ho and like very laser focused on my food and I have to watch it or whatever, I'd probably go with them on what they're eating. What can we add? What can we tweak? But also, like, what do you enjoy? What brings you joy? Can you go out to dinner with your partner? Whatever that might look like. Like, go have a date night. Go see a Broadway show if you can. Maybe you need like a weekend off or vacation. We can still go over what you're going to eat and how that can be fertility boosting, so to speak. You know, so for that, it's like a client who has some sense of control and they're able to use that and bring it to moments of joy instead of just kind of being in their home
In their
weighing whatever it is.
head. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's a big thing, is like really trying to take whatever they need and then elevate it so that they get out. They're distracted. You know, it's kind of, and a lot of times I work with therapists on this, but you know, someone who's maybe usually is isolated, I want you to right now in front of me, text a friend and make plans.
Wow.
Oh, and it's really tough. And I get a lot of pushback, but a lot of times people come back and was like, it was so nice. And I was able to just forget. Like I was just me. I wasn't so-and-so who was trying to have a baby, which I think is very helpful, you know, that for people who are really down in the dumps. Like I might recommend a support group where, you know, other people feel less alone and they're able to have that. A lot of times also for clients, like it's about grounding. Like session with me, how are you sitting? Are you holding a lot of tension? Are your feet on the ground? Can we do some deep breathing together? You know, and that a lot of times kind of helps calm the nervous system where you're able to kind of feel better, because as cliche as it sounds, like stress is just not good for anyone, for the body, emotionally. It does have a lot of negative consequences. And again, it's a stressful world. This is a stressful topic. I totally understand that, and I've been there. But if we can just dial it down, like even 2 points, we're doing something great. And it's about the small goals. I always say to people, like, we're not going to be working together and all of a sudden you get pregnant in a week. Like, I just want to be really transparent and fair. Like, this is a journey and we're weaving through it together, and it's going to have ups and downs, and things are going to be good and things are also going to be not so good. And that is totally okay. I think it's about figuring out what you can put in your toolbox. We call it a toolbox. So it's like your coping skills. And you got to whip it out whenever you need it. So that could be like different kinds of breathing. There's box breathing, Ujjayi breathing, like 4-7-8 breathing. Are you like, would yoga be helpful? Do you need to connect more with nature? Go on a walk. That doesn't mean that you have to like exercise in a certain like capacity, like Pilates, unless you like it. I'm not a fan of hot yoga because I'm just like, why dehydrate yourself for no reason? But like,
especially also in 95 degrees where it is now.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes. Yeah,
Horrible.
yeah.
Think about like bad body image, things are just sticking to you.
Totally.
But yoga is really therapeutic. And I think it's really helpful to connect to your body in a different way. And that has proven to be helpful. I think for people, like you said, who are really like, I want help, or I need to know, like acupuncture has had some good results. Like, go try that. Like, let's find someone who's a reputable source where you're going to feel comfortable and supported. So I don't know if that answered your question. It was kind of a very long-winded response, but I think it's finding where the person's at and figuring out how to just relax ourselves. For clients, usually to see, I can get relaxed. I can have a little bit of an escape. And sometimes I say to clients, like, set an alarm on your phone where like you have to do 5 minutes of like the Calm app or Inside Timer, just to kind of relax yourself and have you time. Or sometimes for people, I'm like, okay, instead of going to get, the ice cream tub, go get, just regular, like the ice cream cones or candy bars, which are single serve, and find like a TV show that you really like and just enjoy that. And like, live in that moment where you're not like gonna feel sick afterwards, but you're taking care of yourself and you're enjoying yourself. So I think it's those little moments of joy, how we bring that. And if people can journal it so that when they go through the hard moments, they can flip back to the good, I think that's truly powerful.
I love that. I love that. I'm just thinking about a friend of mine who was like so petrified because like the person heard from like a Chinese practitioner that they could only eat warm foods. It was all about warm
Uh,
foods because the body needs warm foods in order to manifest a pregnancy. And she was like, "But I really want ice cream. Like, how come I can't have ice cream?"
Or hot, like your blood flow is your blood flow, unless you have a clot. And most of the time, most practitioners now put you on baby aspirin, so things are flowing. Blood thinners, that whole thing. Like, if you like comforting warm soup, that's great, but it's super hot out. Like, get yourself that ice cream. Enjoy that. That's not going to make or break anything.
Yeah, I so practical and so real and just rooted in like facts. I that's what I think, like that's what I love. I mean, I'm also a science person. All of you know that. So I deeply appreciate that, but I think there is so much misinformation out there, and it's so helpful to have someone like you to be able to just say like, "Hey, like I get it and I hear you, but here, let me tell you the way it is." Reva, I deeply, deeply appreciate this conversation. I am sure that if people want to reach out to you, that they can, if they have any questions, tell them where they can find you.
Yes. Well, you could always DM me at Reva Peyser. So that's probably the best way. And my email is Reva Peyser. Well, it's actually rpeysernutrition@gmail.com. Website is still in the works.
Okay.
newly
Okay.
private practice. But yeah, DMing is probably the best. So Reva
Okay.
Peyser, pretty simple.
Okay, perfect. Reva, thank you so much for this absolutely incredible conversation. Just really very grounding and very normalizing for me also, and for hopefully all of you out there. We are continuing this week. We're going to be talking all about body image, fertility, and all things related to that. So please follow along over the course of this week. And if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to DM us as well. Okay. Have a good night, everybody.